Hey everybody, this is Chris from Killer Arcade Games. This is just a quick intro. I'm going to get to the modding instructions just in a second here. This video is actually a version 2.0 of my original video where I mainly showed how to install Maximus Arcade, which pretty much is no longer working and no longer worth paying for. Just know that this is kind of going to be a hodgepodge of multiple videos being brought together. I've got timestamps in the description. I've got all the links you need in the description. I've gone through and checked them since the last video to make sure they're still working. When I originally made version 1.0 of this video, I was basically telling you to use an old PC you had around the house. That'll still work as long as it's a fresh install and all that. Now, if you don't have an old PC or you don't want to go through all the trouble of that, I have now linked to one that I have tested extensively and use in all of my cabinets. The HP Elite Desk 800 runs just about, I don't want to say all MAME games, it runs a large amount of them, probably 98% of them run perfectly on that PC, using varying versions of MAME, but we'll get to that later in the video. I think it's a great PC. It's a little bulky. You don't have to remove it from the case, but it will fit inside of your cabinet. It's just going to be a little tight. The versions I'll link to will be from Amazon and eBay. You can choose which one you like better. I can tell you Amazon is typically more steady with the stock. eBay, different sellers run out of them. I'll try to refresh the link when I can. eBay's typically cheaper. It's whichever one you're more comfortable with. Now, I can tell you pretty much all of these PCs are going to have the same processor, the same RAM, and I try to only link to ones with an SSD. The reason for that is instead of a regular old boring hard drive that's slow and takes forever to boot up, these SSDs are very fast. The computer shuts down in just seconds. It boots up on par with my Mortal Kombat 4. And my Mortal Kombat 4 is actually running the arcade PCB. The real thing is in here. Meanwhile, Mortal Kombat 2 over here is running on this HP PC with an SSD in it. These two cabinets will boot up in almost the exact same amount of time. The MK2 takes probably 5 seconds longer than the real arcade board. So my whole thing was getting as close to the real arcade as possible. Fast boot times, no standing around. My old Killer Instinct PC used to make me wait 2.5 minutes before it was playable. This thing is ready in under 1 minute. It is literally from starting power on to gameplay within less than 1 minute. So that's why I like the SSDs. That's why I link to those. If you have questions about them, leave me a comment below. Warning, some of these mods require you to make irreversible changes to your Arcade1Up cabinet. There are a lot of steps in this process. You will need basic PC skills, and some experience working on electronics is helpful. Follow these instructions at your own risk. So let's get started with this little tip. The issue with MAME is you need to get ROMs that are for the version of MAME you're using. Certain versions of MAME are not going to work well with certain games. Now that that's out of the way, let's move on to the other important thing about MAME. If you download MAME 202, we'll say version 202 because that's one I use frequently and like a lot, you need to get ROMs for that version. Now, how do you know you're getting ROMs for that version? Pretty much just have to Google it. So let's move on to the first step. First step is to go to mamedev.org. That is the official MAME website. We'll go there now. And as you can see, they have all the versions I think they've ever made on here, so you're good for that. But for now, we're going to download MAME 202. And here's another quick side note. If you have a newer computer like the HP one I linked to, just go ahead and grab the 64-bit versions because you're going to need that to run the newer games. Sorry, I'm using a very weird keyboard and mouse, so I have to do things a little weird. Okay, so while that finishes downloading, go ahead and do yourself a favor. Go into this PC, go to local disk. Most people don't install things here anymore. I like to. Go ahead and right-click, go to new and add a new folder, name it MAME. And whatever version of MAME you're using, I highly recommend putting it at the end. So in my case, MAME 202. In case you end up installing different MAME versions down the line, you're gonna know exactly which one you're dealing with. Let's go back to, where is it? I guess we'll go back to Chrome. I'm gonna go ahead and open the file I downloaded. Now we need to tell it where to extract MAME to. So click this here, go down to local disk, find the folder you made. In my case, it's MAME 202. Click OK, click extract. Wait for that to finish, and then we can move on. Okay, now that that's finished, go down here, back to your C drive, go to MAME 202. Now you're going to see you have a ton of stuff in here now. You want to mainly focus on this folder, ROMs. Go ahead and open that. You'll see it's going to be empty. I would drag it off to the side here. We don't need that one, but let's get a new folder or a new window going. Wherever you've downloaded your ROMs from, go ahead and grab that. They may be in your downloads folder. In my case, I'm storing them over here right now. Say you downloaded Mortal Kombat. You're going to have an MK zip file. You want to leave it zipped. Do not unzip it. All you really have to do is drag it over into your ROMs folder. Now, games like War Gods, Killer Instinct, and a few others are going to have a hard drive file which would end in .chd. The file name has to match it exactly. You've got your ROM here, which is wargods.zip, which it doesn't show the .zip, but it's wargods.zip, and you have a wargods.chd. So let's copy this over. Just move the rest of these right on in. Alright, let's go back, and then go down here to MAME 64. Double click that. It's going to load this old school looking kind of software. I don't know, it always reminded me of DOS in a weird way, but go ahead to the left, click available, and that's going to show you the games you've just dropped in. In most cases, they're going to be ready to play right away. Let's just double click one and see what happens. You're going to have a few messages in the way, errors detected. This stuff will all pass eventually, but you're ready to go. It's running MK2, no problem. It's very simple. Now you hit escape. So now you've got your games in here and you're all set. You may have to configure a few options. For example, with this particular HP PC, sometimes you have to change the video options. If you're having a weird look where it looks like lines are going through your screen, or there's some kind of interruption, you want to go over here and change this to OpenGL. Return to previous menu. And then save configuration. And once you return to previous menu again, it reboots and then it'll fix that problem for you. You'll know almost immediately if you're having that issue because this whole area will be blinking and it won't look right. So once you do that, you're good to go. Alright guys, I'm going to show you a little bit of settings that I like to change on all of my new arcade builds on the Windows 10 PC. This is a PC that I've already got set up that I don't use in a cabinet, but I can kind of show you everything here. Start by clicking the Start menu, click Settings. Once you're in there, let's go to System, and on the left side you want to go to Power and Sleep. Now mine are already set properly, yours are probably not. By default they say something else, but you want this to always say never for when plugged in, turn off after. You just don't want this thing turning off while it's running. It's just going to cause problems, so just put it on never. You don't ever want the PC to sleep either, so change this to never also. Additional power settings on the right. That's under related settings. Click that. I think it's a pop-up, but let's see. Yeah, a little pop-up window. Yours is probably set to balanced. I always choose high performance, and then I go change plan settings. You never want the display to turn off, so change this setting to never. Of course, we already checked on the sleep thing, but make sure it says never here. And click Save Changes and move on. After that, let's go to Update and Security. This one's a little tricky. This is why I say just leave Windows disconnected from the internet. I never leave any of my arcades on the internet. I try not to even put them back on my network unless I absolutely have to. It's just asking for trouble. If there's no reason to connect this to the internet, just don't do it. In fact, when I need to add stuff to the computer, say I need to add some ROMs, I mainly download them to a flash drive from another computer, and then I just go plug the flash drive into the PC to keep it disconnected from the internet. As soon as you start connecting this to the internet, Windows starts looking right away for updates. And while it's looking for updates and installing these updates, it's going to slow down your emulation. It's going to be causing pop-ups to happen while you're mid-game, and it's really going to take you out of the arcade experience. So I don't know how to exactly turn this off, so what I do is just simply disconnect the PC from the internet. Oh, from there, let's go over to Gaming. That's back on the main Windows setting page. Click Gaming. There's something you may notice. I've seen this on people's videos when they're showing off their cabinets, and it drives me insane. This setting is typically on by default. I can't stand it. I'm turning that off and unchecking open game bar using blah blah. You know, this is if you have an Xbox controller, which you probably don't. Go ahead and keep that unchecked. Game bar will pop up every time you launch a game and say, do you want to record this? You don't want to do that. It's only going to cause you trouble, so just turn it off. If you've made it through all of these steps and everything seems to be working fine, I'd suggest moving on to modifying the cabinet. Start by ensuring your cabinet is unplugged. No one wants to get a little shock while doing this. Then move on to opening the back of your cabinet. Alright, so once you're inside, unplug this. Go ahead and remove that all together. Make sure it's unplugged from the wall too. Go underneath there, make sure you pull out the ribbon cable that connects your controller panel. There we go. Then take off these two screws here and here. There's one on each side. Once you've got those out, do not pull on this, of course. You need to come down here, remove these connections. Okay, unseat that one. This should come out pretty easily. If not, you might... let's see what happens. Okay. So just be gentle with it, of course. Now on here you have your ground wire connected to the board with a screw. I hope you can see that in there. I'm going to pull that out. Okay, and that's it. Your original board is going to be out of there. You can put all that aside. You're not going to need that anymore. You do need these three connections though. Look at the model number on the back of your monitor. It's this number here. Check the description of this video. You should see that model number with a link to Amazon. Buy the video encoder board. It's very easy to install it. Get the ground wire. Your card should have included a little nut and screw. If not, you're going to need to find one that fits. Put the screw through the hole on the wire and then put it through this hole on the board. Then add the nut and tighten it up. I didn't make mine super tight, but snug enough that it wouldn't be loose. Then plug in this power cable. And lastly, get this cable, plug it in with the red wires to the left side of the connection. If you're unsure, be sure to take a close look at this video. Next, mount it somewhere inside the cabinet, but be sure not to mount it directly to the metal enclosure on your monitor. It will damage it. If you have enough slack in your cables, mount it to the wood just below the metal. If yours was like mine, take the box this card came in, use double-sided sticky tape and stick it to the back of the metal. Then use more double-sided tape or Velcro and stick the board to the box. It's ugly, but it's inside the cabinet and no one should see it. You're still going to use your original Arcade1Up power supply. I stuck mine to the wall of the cabinet with some double-sided tape. It's about midway up to keep it out of the way of the other components I'll be installing. Start by taking your controller off the cabinet. Remove these 4 screws and it should come right off. Start by taking these off. Lift up a little, pinch it. If you put them together, you probably know it comes off easily. Just unscrew them to the left. You don't need these necessarily, so toss them aside. Take off your plexiglass. Now try to keep from touching the inside of that, so put it off here. Then flip it over, remove this plastic cover. From there you can start unplugging all of the buttons from the board. Cut the zip ties holding the wires and start removing the buttons. These buttons will come out by pinching the 2 buttons on the sides, then push them through the top of the control deck. Repeat all of these steps until all of the buttons are removed. Next, take out the screws that are holding the joysticks to the deck. They are probably still going to be stuck by some glue. I just flipped my panel over, applied some pressure, and broke them free. On one of my builds, I had to use a rubber mallet to knock them out. You can remove the controller board, but leave the speaker if you plan to reuse it. If you're using the HAPP controls I linked to in the description, keep watching. If you're using Sanwa or some other kind, most of these steps will still apply. The joysticks will be a little bit different though. I can't offer a lot of help here, but I can say they should be a lot easier to install than the HAPP sticks. Moving on. This is just going to be the basics of this, that once you get this down, you're going to get it all no problem. You have your button, you have your micro switch, you have a collar. We're just going to put all these in right now. It'd be smart to have a picture of what the Mortal Kombat control panel looks like for reference, because you don't want to put these in wrong. You may think, I memorized where these go. Well, you're looking at it backwards, and you guys especially watching this are looking at it flipped and backwards. So, okay, so the high punch and low punch buttons are red, high kick, low kick are blue. So I'll start with this one since it's red. I'll do it from this side so you can see it. Drop it in the hole. Leave your micro switch aside for now, flip it back over. Take this collar, let me hold it from the bottom. Okay, take this collar, you want to have this side down. It has a grip so it'll hang on to whatever you screw it down to. Put it on just like a nut basically. Screw it down, don't make it crazy tight just yet. You're probably going to need to readjust because you're going to put your micro switches in next. Now this is going to be a tough one for me to show you. Once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy and they're easy to take out. So here, these holes on the side line up with the holes here and here. So I would start with this side, prong side facing down, put it in the hole on the side, then slide it back. It's gonna get caught right here. You push this little piece out, push it all the way in, and now it's in place, and you can test it, you'll hear it, and you're good to go. Now to install the joysticks. This could be the hardest part of the build. You'll probably need someone to help you. Depending on which cabinet you're working with, you will probably have to cut some of the plastic mount off of the joystick. It's the part that will be on the underside. If you're installing them on a Street Fighter cabinet with a 6-button layout, you'll have to cut off the corners that will be near the buttons on each stick's mount. The mount is too large and would cover the button holes near the stick. There's no science to this, just line it up and mark it to where it needs to be cut, and use a Dremel or some similar tool to cut it off. Warning, there will be plastic bits that can be very hot and will be flying all around. Wear eye protection and do this somewhere you won't mind hot plastic bits flying around. It can stick to fabrics and carpet. It may even be wise to disassemble the stick housing to have more clearance. Again, do this part at your own risk. If you're modding the Mortal Kombat cabinet, you should only need to cut off a strip of the Player 1 stick's mount. You can see roughly how much I removed here. It just needs to be clear of the side wall of the cabinet. Measure twice and cut once is a great saying to remember here. You may be wondering why I use HAPP controls. The reason is, that is what was in the original arcade cabinets we all loved. They're excellent controls and worth the extra trouble if you ask me. If not, Sanwa sticks shouldn't require any modding but won't feel the same as a real cabinet. That choice is yours though. I will link to some Sanwa controls in the description. After you've prepared your sticks for installation, line up the joystick underneath the cabinet. Look through the front of the control panel. You should be able to eyeball it and make sure it looks centered. It will probably never be perfect, but get it as close as possible. If not, your sticks may rub the cabinet and that just wouldn't be good. This is where you'll need some help. Have someone hold them in position, as close to as centered as possible. Then you sink some screws in to hold it in place. I will show you the screw size I used on the screen. There's also a link to some on Amazon in the description. You may have removed some of your mounting holes when cutting. You can use the hole next to it or drill a new hole through the plastic, but be careful. Depending on which hole you sink the screws in, you may need different sized screws. I did use the one size and used the holes that were still there. I was careful not to go too deep, as to not stick it through the front of the control panel. It does matter which way you mount them. The longer sides should be up and down, with the thinner sides on the left and the right. After you've installed your stick mounts, it's time to put it all together. Place your controller's plexiglass on before putting the joystick through the top of the control panel. Place these parts on and put this clip in to secure it all. If you're unsure, read the little instruction sheet that should have come with the bag. After all of your buttons, joysticks, and micro switches are installed, we'll move on to installing the USB encoders and wiring them. On my original Killer Instinct build, I just used double-sided sticky tape, or actually I used Velcro. So I stuck a piece of Velcro here, stuck it to the board, put it on. That worked fine, but I've noticed when I have gotten back inside the cabinet to check on things, it is starting to fall off. I think the weight of the USB cord hanging off is pulling it down. So on this one, I used some of the little feet. I actually used the hole that was here, the thing that held that big plastic piece on over the original controls. So I used that hole to drill, and that screw. So one of those screws, you took off the plastic thing. But anyway, I used that hole, put that screw in there. It was perfect. I used one of the screws that comes in the bag of these little feet. So I used a 1/8 size drill bit. This hole did not work. I used this hole here, drilled it out, only very, very shallow. The screw doesn't go in very deep anyway, and of course you don't want to risk drilling through this 1/2 inch piece of wood and popping out the other side and ruining your art. So just know that you can do it. I'm only going to put the 2. It seems pretty sturdy. Be careful when you're pushing in the connections, maybe put some force underneath it, but other than that, I think it's good to go. All the buttons are in, all the micro switches are in. If you'll notice, I only put in one USB encoder board. I placed it here, I dropped it in the arcade to make sure it fits. I even plugged in one of these cords to make sure the front piece on the arcade does not pinch the cord or push it too bad. It doesn't, everything seems to be good. So we're on to wiring up player 1's side. The middle one is where you attach the red wire. So red on the middle, black on the bottom, top is unused. I'm going to interrupt here to say that I didn't realize they made HAPP specific USB encoders. The prongs on the HAPP micro switches are much longer than the little Sanwa buttons. The kit I bought is for Sanwa. The wire colors are different. They are white and blue. I couldn't get an answer from the seller, but judging from what I've seen in the photos, the white cable would go on the middle prong and the blue would go on the bottom. I would still recommend doing your own research, check the manual, email the seller if it doesn't say in the instructions. If I find the answer in the meantime, you'll find it down in the description. I'm going to link to both USB encoders. I'll specify which one is for which. Be sure to buy the right one depending on what button set you go with. If not, you'll have to modify every one of those metal clips. Red on that middle prong, black on the bottom. Top is left open. Then you just plug this into the board. When you're plugging in your joysticks, know that this is going to be backwards. Again, it doesn't really matter much as far as I can tell. You're going to assign each direction a button in MAME, but let's at least do it right for now just to save any confusion. So when you are pushing left on the joystick, when it's flipped over, this is it. So if you have it sitting like I do, left, right, up, down, everything is kind of backwards. So looking at your instructions, again, just do it for just the joysticks primarily, but we'll get to the buttons in a second. Left is going to be this slot here, second in from the right. That's if your USB port is on this side. And if you've mounted yours up like this on these plastic feet, know that pushing down on it might bend the board, so give it a little support underneath it. And just start wiring it all up. Hopefully everything's gonna fit. The next input is the right switch, so grab another cord, plug it in, and these do matter which direction you plug them in, but you really can't plug them in wrong since they have those extra little bits right here. So, boom. The next one will be down. And if you end up using the HAPP joysticks where you had to cut off this side on the player 1 side, these prongs are going to stick out too far, so I've bent them in just with my fingers. So you may have to even push a little bit on this, bend it in a little more, and that should be able to clear the side of the cabinet when you put it in. Other than that, everything else should fit perfectly. Okay, now the rest of these buttons are going to be installed on this bottom row, and that's the side with the most inputs on it. It says it starts from this side is 1, 2, 3, counts up, so that's how we're going to wire them. You might want to start with a plan on how to wire these. First off, make sure everything fits. So since your farthest button is going to be, if you mounted it right here, your farthest button is going to be the start button. It looks like it's all going to fit perfectly, but I would put the start button last just to make sure it fits nicely. So I would do, this is how I'm going to do it. I cannot remember how MAME maps it, but we'll figure it out when we do the setup. I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So let's start with high punch, which will be plugged in on the number 1 spot. Put the red in the middle, black on the bottom. Okay. I know MAME maps the buttons in a really weird fashion, so I'm sure this isn't going to make a lot of sense once we're doing it. I'm not even going to obsess over it. I'll have a guide for you guys. So if you're watching, by the time we get to the point of mapping the buttons, hopefully I'll be able to overlay something on the screen, or I'll be very clear about it when we do it. Wire the second player buttons and joysticks the same way. It will be helpful to have them the same way when you're mapping the buttons in the game. Be careful where you place the USB encoders. If you're screwing them into the control deck, double check that they'll fit inside the cabinet before wiring everything up. Now you need to drill out some holes for a coin button to give games credits, and you need a button to exit emulation and return to your games list. I have linked to the drill bit you need. You can use your old Arcade1Up buttons for this, or you can order some black buttons like I did. It's a personal preference here. I chose to drill mine through the panel right under the control panel. I don't recommend drilling them through the control deck because you then have to drill holes through the plexiglass, which may break. Keep a few things in mind when you're drilling the holes. You have to make sure the buttons will fit under your current buttons. HAPP buttons are long and stick out far underneath. I drilled my holes a little lower than center. Don't go too low to ensure your wires can reach the encoder board. I'll include my measurements on the screen. Mark the center of where your holes will be and drill them out, using a 1 1/8 inch drill bit. Install your buttons in the holes. Then wire the micro switches to your encoder board, but wait to put the micro switch in the button until you've got the buttons in place. It will make it much easier since the cords are so short. Don't forget to plug your USB cables in before installing the controller deck on the cabinet. It would be smart to mark the USB cables as player 1 and player 2 just so you know which are which. You can install the micro switch in the button from the back of the cabinet. You'll see me showing you how I turn off my PC before shutting down the cabinet. I use a cheap external power button that mounts to the top of my cabinet. It's a great solution to avoid having to open the cabinet to shut it down or to avoid having to use a mouse. Here's a quick tutorial. Alright, so it's really easy to work on these computers when you get them. They almost all come with one of these. This is specific to the HP computer, but a lot of them work just like this. You can pull this right off. And just to be extra safe, you might want to make sure your computer is not plugged into anything, and maybe even push the start button a few times, or the power button, to make sure it drains all the power. And now we're going to go ahead and install the, where is it? This is the power button connector. If you're using an external power button like I am, this is how you'll install that. Okay, so underneath here, this just lifts right up. No need for tools or anything. You're going to unplug this here. This is the power button. For reference, here's the CPU, here's the RAM. It's the black plug up here. It's hard to say what the top and the bottom is of this computer since there's no feed on here or on here. Now, if you want to, in order to get this cord to run through and still put the outside case on, you need to flip this thing up and back. Just go ahead and remove one of these altogether. Expansion card slots, you can just put it aside. Run your cable down through here. See if I can get it in there. Now you got your cable in the cabinet or in the PC case. Take this side, power switch facing up. CPU's here, you want it to face this direction up. You're going to plug it into the second row from the bottom. And I'll show you up close in just a second. There are 5 rows of pins from top to bottom. Plug yours in with the lettering facing up towards the top of the PC case. Since these are probably Chinese made, it's possible they won't all be the exact same. If yours isn't working with the power switch lettering facing up, try to swap it with the power switch lettering facing down. You can test it by plugging in the PC and pressing the power button. If it turns on, power it off immediately by holding down the power button until it turns off. If it works, move on to the next step. So if everything is now working, you should probably double check your shutdown settings in Windows. I'm assuming you have Windows 10. Once you're at your desktop here, click Start, go up to Settings, and then you want to go to System. On the left side here, you have Power and Sleep. Click that. I have both of these set to Never. Now that's up to you, of course, but I would recommend that if you want it to perform like mine does. We want to do over here on the right, Additional Power Settings. This is where you can go to the left panel now and choose what the power buttons do. Yours may come set up by default like this, but that's not always the case, so check this out. Under Power and Sleep button settings, when I press the power button, this should say shutdown. If it doesn't, drop down this box here, click shutdown. Click Save Changes, and you're good to go. That will make sure your PC shuts down when you push the button. Now I'm going to tell you how to make sure your computer starts up when you flip the power back onto the cabinet. Currently I have mine set up where I flip the power switch on the power strip, and that will make my PC boot up with the rest of the cabinet. It looks very much like a real arcade when you can flip one switch and have everything start immediately. Okay, in order to get into the HP BIOS settings, use a traditional keyboard, a wired keyboard, one that's going to work right away. So if you don't have one permanently hooked up to yours, at least pull one out of storage and hook it up for this. Once you press the power button to boot up your HP, which I'm going to do now, immediately start pressing F10 on the keyboard. Just keep pushing it repeatedly until you see something on the screen. You're not going to hurt anything. Push F10, there you go. Now you're in the BIOS settings. Okay, so once you're in the BIOS settings, use your keyboard's arrow keys and go to the right all the way to Advanced, and hit enter on power on options. You want to scroll down to the after power loss setting. Now right here mine is set to off. You want to switch it to on. And that's just so when you turn the power off to your cabinet, your PC power is cut completely. The power supply drains every little bit of power that's still in the capacitors. So it's completely dead at that point. Now when you flip the power back onto the cabinet, the computer is going to know as soon as the power supply fills with power, it's going to alert the motherboard's going to boot the computer. And that's what you want. So after that, press F10 to accept, and go back to File, and hit enter on Save Changes and Exit, and that'll reboot your computer back to normal. So this is a very large PC. I keep mine pushed all the way to the front of one side of the cabinet, and that leaves me just a little bit of room back here to make sure everything gets plugged in, but it does fit. Another tip I have for you is to buy some of this Velcro. This is a really good deal. I've got a link for it down in the description. It comes as 2 separate rolls. You just get the size you need, cut them to the length, and you're good to go. I've been using this on my builds for a while now. I have 2 large strips holding the PC to the wall. I mean, you can almost move the entire cabinet because that holds it so well. You can use it to stick your monitor board to the wall. I've used it to stick the power strip. I've even used it to put my subwoofer on the wall. So it's very useful stuff at a good price. I also stuck the power button to the top of the cabinet. I chose this location so I could still fit my speakers up there. Now it's time to install your speakers or your amplifier. I chose to go with a new set of speakers, PC speakers to be more specific. I wanted more bass. I like to feel the sound radiate through the cabinet while I'm playing. I linked to a decent set of Logitech speakers in the description. I use these on my Mortal Kombat cabinet. They have decent sound and bass for this size cabinet. I placed the subwoofer inside, used some Velcro tape to stick it to the wall. I just did that in case I need to move the cabinet. I don't want everything falling all around. I used some Velcro to stick the speakers to the top of the cabinet. If you do it just right, you shouldn't see them from the front, unless you're really tall. Run the wires down the cabinet and tuck them back inside. Then plug everything in. Alright, so now it's time to plug in all the stuff to your PC. Mine is already done currently, but you got your power cable. It depends on which orientation you put it in here, but I have a special setup here, but really you can use your VGA or your HDMI. Make sure you plug the sound into the green port there. It's color coded usually, but your sound port may be a little different. And then, plug in your controls and all that stuff. It's time to set up the controls in MAME. You need a mouse and keyboard for this step. Also, be sure your USB encoders are plugged into the motherboard before starting. The PC may need to be connected to the internet to install the drivers automatically. Once that's finished, go to your MAME folder on your C drive, double-click the mame.exe file, and start with your first game. Once the game boots up, press Tab on your keyboard, scroll down to Input this game, and press Enter. Here you'll see all of the controls you need to assign buttons to. You won't need to assign them all, just the ones that apply to you. In this case, Player 1 Start is the first input I need to assign. Press Enter on the input, then press the button you want to assign it to. Repeat these steps until you're finished. If you followed my button scheme and added the coin button to the front, be sure to map coin 1 to that button on each game. Interruption here. To map the Mortal Kombat buttons it can be quite confusing. I'm going to show you how it is. Button 1, high punch. Button 2, block. Button 3, high kick. Button 4, low punch. Button 5, low kick. And button 6 is going to be run. Once you're finished, test all of the controls on each player. If everything seems right, press escape on your keyboard and move to the next game. Repeat all of these steps with each game you have. Some games will have complicated button layouts that will require trial and error. It will be frustrating, but keep working with it and you'll get it right. I'm going to show you how to install and set up Launchbox for MAME. This is a very simple tutorial. If you have a bunch of different consoles you want to add to it, I don't really know how to do that. I can tell you how to set up and make MAME work with Launchbox and Bigbox. So here we go. First, you got to go get your Launchbox set up. Go ahead and run that. Accept the agreement, of course. Click Next. I don't really care where mine installs personally, so actually, you know what? I am going to move it to the C drive. That's because I have my MAME folder on the C drive. It really doesn't matter where you put it as long as you know where to find it if you need it. Let's do that. We definitely want a start menu icon. I would like a desktop icon, so I am going to check this box here. Click Next, and click Install. Let's just wait and see. Alright, so it's probably going to ask you this. Sure, why not? It's what it always asks you, so don't panic on that one. And I am using Windows 10 if you can't tell already. Here we go. So Launchbox is booting up for the first time, and we can go into the setup. Alright, so once Launchbox starts for the very first time, it's going to show you this. I'm actually going to go ahead and click Don't Show This Again for this version. I think it's annoying. Close that. You're also going to want to just close this. I like to do it a little bit different, which would be to go up here and click Tools. Once you go down there, click Manage Emulators. Here's where you're going to add MAME to the emulators. Go ahead and click the Add button right here. Emulator name, type in MA. Well, there you go. MAME is going to start popping up. Go ahead and click MAME. We've got it over here. I don't know why this is in the way, but we'll just move out of the way. Down here, Emulator Application Path. This is where you're going to show the program where you installed MAME. In this case, I put mine on the C drive. Yours may be somewhere else. Either way, go to MAME, your MAME folder that is. Go down to MAME 64 or MAME, or just MAME. If you have MAME 32-bit, that's fine. It'll just say MAME. Whichever file you use to launch MAME with, click it and click Open. So that's now showing where to launch MAME from. Let's see, I don't mess with any other options here. All I do is just click OK. From here we can close that. Then we can go back to Tools, scroll down to Import. Then you're going to select ROM files. Now this is a wizard, which is fine. We don't really have to worry about that. You're going to be the wizard here. You're going to find your ROMs folder by clicking Add Folder. And again, in my case, I have it on the C drive. So that's going to be, I'm going to close that. Find your MAME folder, scroll down till you see ROMs, click ROMs, click OK, then you want to click Next. What platform are you importing the games for? Well, this is going to be for MAME, so I usually type in all caps, MAME, and go down here and click Next. Now choose Emulator, open the drop-down box, click MAME, click Next. Now in this one, would you like to move or copy the files? In my case, I have always just used the files in their location. I don't really want Launchbox messing with them personally, so this is what I choose. Now here, would you like to download metadata for your games? I just leave this checked. So that's going to pull information about the games that you have ROMs for. Click Next. Here are all the different pieces of art and information it's going to try to find. I leave it all checked. I just click Next. You can go in and turn some stuff off if you'd like. I'd prefer just to leave it on and click Next. Here's where you need to sign into EMU Movies. EMU Movies is going to actually find video files that will play while you're hovering over each game that you're looking through. So if you want that, click Configure, and you need to enter, if you already have one, enter your user ID or password. If you don't already have one, just click this box to register. In this case, I'm going to go with Chrome, why not? I believe I am already registered, so I'm not going to show you this whole setup. All you have to do is basically go in, click the sign up button right there on the website, go through all the process. It's just like signing up for any other service. Once you've done that, come back here and enter your EMU Movies username and password. I'm going to do that now. Alright, once you've entered it, I've probably blurred mine if you're watching this, but once you've entered your stuff, click Test just to make sure it works. Successfully logged into EMU Movies is what you want to see. Once you see that, click OK. Now, would you like to download media from Yes, of course you would like to download media. If you don't, I guess you can just select none and move on. I always just do this though. It pulls pretty good information. Would you like to specify any custom options? I personally don't mess with any of this stuff, so I'm just going to leave it alone and click Next. If you want to read through some of these and kind of play with them, go for it, but I don't recommend it if you're new. How would you like to import your MAME games? Well, this is another one that I don't mess with. I just click Next. If you want to dive into that, go for it. So this page is going to sit here for a little while it looks through your games. In my case, I don't have a ton of games in here. I've got just these games right here. This is going to be kind of like a shooter setup that I'm running right now. And these are the only games that I've gotten to work so far, so that's good for me. It found the ones I wanted. If everything looks good to you, click Finish. Now down here, it's going to be searching and downloading all the stuff from EMU Movies, all the games database information. So just let it do its thing. Depending on how large your actual ROMs folder is, it could take a really long time or it could just take a few minutes. Either way, go get a drink, go wander around, go do something. I wouldn't recommend messing with anything while it does it. You can see the progress right here. It's importing Area 51 information. Just let it do its thing, and when it's done, we'll pick it back up on the other side. "11 games were imported successfully." Just click OK to clear that out. And here you can look through and see what information it did grab. Going the wrong way there. So I'm pretty certain it didn't actually find all of my games, but that's something we'll worry about a little bit later. Police Trainer is there. I thought I had Time Crisis 2. So now you think this is great. This is how it's supposed to look. Well, of course, this isn't how it's supposed to look. You're supposed to have that beautiful big box look. Now, the problem is you're on the free version, as you can see here. So click that free version deal. It's going to tell you Launchbox Premium is available for purchase and provides extra customization features, blah, 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 all that. Basically what it's saying is if you want Bigbox, if you want it to look pretty, you're going to need to click this link, go to their website, decide which plan is best for you. Good news is they hate DRM, just like everybody else, cut and paste installation, blah, blah. Here's where it comes down to it. The price is actually a little bit cheaper than I remember. I thought it was $40. I chose the regular license. This means I can get Launchbox Premium and Bigbox forever. I'm going to own that, I guess, until they stop making it or until maybe I'm dead. I don't know which one comes first. Now, the only downside here is you will be required to renew the license for $15 in order to access new features after 1 year. I personally don't care. I don't plan to use my Launchbox, Bigbox setup very much other than just to basically launch the games and get out of it. I don't care about the new features. I don't customize that much personally. If you're somebody who wants to just have that peace of mind, you have forever updates, you're going to be set until the end of time. Go ahead and select the $75 option. I went with the $30 one just because, like I said, I just needed to launch my games. Choose which one you'd like. You're going to pay them. You're going to get an email that's going to have an XML file that you're going to then go back into here, and you're going to register a new license file. You click Browse. You go find your license file. It is on the local disk. I just have it sitting right there. I'm going to show it where it is. Again, I need to blur all of this stuff, so you're probably not going to see much of this, but basically my license was accepted. We're good to go. You can go ahead and close Launchbox. Now you go over to the big boy, the big box, and double click that and let it launch up. There you go. You should see this big box pop up right here. If your computer is a little bit slower, it might take a little bit of time to actually launch. Either way, you're probably going to sit on this screen for just a little bit. And there we go. So we have a very generic looking main screen here. But this is what it's essentially going to look like. You can go in and customize it a lot more than this. I guess it didn't pull much information for Poor Lethal Enforcers 2 or Maximum Force. I may be able to work on that later. But essentially this will get you up and running. If you want to fart around with some of the actual settings a little bit more later, that's up to you. 1, 2, 3. So if you're like me, you're not going to want to see this screen. All I have is MAME. There's no reason for this screen. You shouldn't have to click an extra enter button or hit a button to get into all of these just to launch your game. I also don't like seeing this. Say I want to play Area 51. I select Area 51. It goes to this screen. I don't need a star rating. I definitely don't want people to be able to open the folder or have all these issues while they're trying to launch the game. It's just an extra screen that's in the way. So let's go hit escape, 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 and go down to, first let's go to options. Options, then we'll go over to here. Let's start, we're going to make it skip the platforms view. You want to change default startup view to all games. Trying to get there, just keep hitting it till you're there, and there you go. Now hit escape. Now let's go up to general, press enter, scroll down, and go ahead and skip details screen. That's going to skip that screen that's in between you and launching the game. Now it's time to make sure that you can control Launchbox using your controller, basically. You don't want to have a mouse and keyboard just to launch your games. So what you want to do is get a keyboard. In my case, it's a mini one. Press escape, and then go down to options. Scroll all the way down to controller, which would be here. Now, if these two options aren't set, you need to go ahead and check those. If they are set, let's move down to controller mappings. Press enter on that one. Basically, these should be set for you automatically. If not, you need to do just like with MAME. Press them, press the stick you want to use, like in this case, push up on the left stick. And then the other one you really need to pay attention to after you set all of these directional ones would be this one here, select. So this is the one that's going to actually let you map the select buttons. If you only want to have one button selected, you can press the enter button, press the start button on your controller, press whatever button you want on there. But if you want multiple buttons, just keep doing it and it'll keep adding buttons to it. Once you're done with that, I would strongly recommend disabling basically all of these other ones. At least this is what I do on my cabinets, so I would recommend you do it here if you want them to operate more like an arcade. That way nobody accidentally exits Launchbox or does anything that basically breaks the cabinet, and then you have to come help them with a keyboard and mouse. So in order to clear these out, select them, press escape, and it'll switch it to none. So that's what we need to do, is go through and make sure these all say none basically, except for these top 5. This is what I use only. Navigational stuff and the select stuff. Here's an important tip with MAME, and you can only do this by launching MAME. I would recommend doing this when you're setting up your controls, and I apologize for the bad look here, but basically launch MAME. Once MAME is running, here's a very important thing you need to do, is go ahead and configure options, go down to general inputs. Select that, user interface, sorry, hopefully you guys can see this. And then you need to go down and find this option, which is called UI cancel. This button is very important because this is what's going to get you out of MAME and back to Launchbox. In my case, I've mapped this right button here. That one is the one I use to exit MAME and get back to Launchbox. So basically set that one to that button or whatever button you're using as your exit button. One last tip, after you've set that button, you're no longer going to be able to exit using the escape key unless you map this also. You can do that by pressing enter and then pressing escape and then pressing enter again and pressing your button. And that will actually add 2 buttons there. But say you didn't do that, say you just mapped this one button. To get out of these menus and get MAME to exit, just keep pressing that button and you'll be back to your desktop. Alright, I'm just going to show you guys really quickly here how to run 2 different versions of MAME using the same Launchbox. And it's going to mix all your games together, so you're not going to even know that you're running 2 different versions, but you got to start by going to Manage Emulators. You already have your original version of MAME there. Depending on how you set it up, it should look something like that. Click Add. In emulator name, type M. I don't know, I'm going to put MAME 2. I'm going to go with MAME 2. That makes the most sense to me. Then you just show it where that emulator is. In my case, it's in Documents, MAME 209. Let's open that, and then go down to MAME 64, double click it, just like you do with your other one. Now here's where it gets a little different. Go up to Associated Platforms, click here, type in MAME, and then leave these 2 blank. Let's go back to the details screen, click Don't Use Quotes. This is all the stuff I have checked on my other ones. If yours is done differently, do it how you do it. But I have all these checked on mine. Now you want to click OK. It's going to ask you, do you want to add this keyboard provider D input thing for MAME? It has to happen as far as I know, so I always click yes. If you are trying to launch an older version of MAME through Launchbox, you're going to run into problems most likely. For example, on my Killer Instinct cabinet, I run MAME 139. For some reason, something has changed in Launchbox, and I cannot get old versions of MAME to actually launch. So I found the fix for it. You just go through and set it up as you normally would, but we do one thing very different. And here's where it's different. Normally, you can still check these 2 boxes, by the way. Alright, now you click OK, it's going to ask you this. MAME requires the command line parameters, blah, 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 key, import, provider, blah, blah. This is where the problem is. It's going to say, would you like to add this before saving? Before I said click yes, and that is the case when you're using new versions of MAME. Just to clarify, I don't know exactly what version of MAME causes the problem and which ones are the ones that are considered new enough to not have this issue. I can tell you if you're using anything before MAME 150, you're probably going to have this problem. What I would recommend is, if you're unsure if your MAME is going to be an issue, go ahead and let it put this command line in there, save it, and if you go to launch your games and they don't work, go back and edit it and take this out. So for now, since this is MAME 139, I know it's not going to work. I'm going to click no. That line's going to remain blank. As you can see here, when you click edit, it's still blank. Let's close it out, and now it should launch my games just fine. And now I've got an extra version of MAME in here. Now you need to add those games to it, so click Tools at the top, go down to Import, go over to ROM Files, click Next. You're in the wizard here, click Add Folder, and now you need to go find your new version of MAME you just put in, which is MAME 209 in my case. I'm going to scroll down, show it where my ROMs folder is, and click OK. Then you're going to click Next. Platform for imported games, go with MAME. Click Next. Choose an emulator. You've got two different MAMEs. This one you want to do your MAME 2. Click Next. I like to leave my files in the current location. So let's go ahead and download the data. This is all stuff you should know. If you don't know how to do any of this part here, I don't know how you set up your Launchbox, but I have another video on that, so I'll link to that in the description. I leave all this stuff left alone, trying not to go too fast here. Now in this case, the game I'm adding is technically unplayable, meaning it's not 100% emulation perfect, whatever. It doesn't work 100%. So I always have to uncheck the skip games unplayable in MAME. That way it'll pull information for me and pull the ROMs. Now I only have one ROM I'm adding. It's NBA Showtime, so there you go. It found it. Let's go ahead and click Finish. It's going to download the data real quick, and it should add it to my games list. Alright, one game was imported successfully, and that's what I want. It's right here, MAME NBA Showtime, or it doesn't say MAME, but NBA Showtime, whatever, NBA on NBC. So let's go ahead and close this now. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and, now that I've closed the Launchbox setup deal, I'm going to go over here to Bigbox and launch Bigbox. Let's see if the game has been added. Let's see if I can launch it and it didn't mess up my other MAME setups. I only have a few games on here. Yeah, that's all I've got really. So let's see if it launches NBA Showtime, which is funny because it has the wrong art there. Yeah, I know it doesn't work. I'm actually gonna have to go press a button here. Oh, nope, I got it. It looks like it's good to go because it would have given me all kinds of errors probably. But yeah, okay, it's booting the game right now and we're good. So let's back out. I'm just gonna double check that I can actually launch NFL Blitz. Let's go with the first Blitz, why not? These are running MAME 175, and it looks like it works, so let's keep it going just real quick to make sure it boots. And there you have it. One of the best things to do with your PC that's going to be used in your arcade cabinet is to set Bigbox to launch at startup, meaning you flip the switch, the power comes on to the cabinet, and Bigbox will automatically launch and put you into your game selection. So it's really setting it up to where anybody can play your cabinet. There's no need to mess with a mouse and keyboard. So now what you need to do is go down here to this search bar, type in RUN, which is run, press enter. In here, type in shell, no space, colon, start up. Also, no space, just one word. Press enter. That's going to open your folder which contains your startup items. Now if you've got Bigbox somewhere on your desktop, just right click it, go down, create shortcut. That's going to make one here, then grab it, drag it over to this folder and drop it there. Now when you close this, once you reboot your computer is going to boot as normal. You'll see the desktop, and then you'll see the Bigbox logo because it's automatically starting up. You don't have to grab a keyboard and mouse to get things running. This is a great way to do it. If you've made it to this point, it's time to button up this cabinet. It probably looks like a mess inside, so let's clean it up. Get your power strip. I linked to one in the description that I used on both builds. It has a long cable and 6 outlets. I used Velcro to stick it to the wall of the cabinet. Pay attention to where you'll want it. I did mine like this so I could reach around the back of the cabinet and just flip the switch. It's as far back as I could get it. Once you've mounted it, grab a tape measure and see where you'll need to drill a hole in the back of your cabinet door. This hole will allow you to reach in and turn the power off and on in your cabinet. Measure twice and then drill your hole. I used a large drill bit. I'll link to one of the same size in the description. I also drilled another hole for the power cable to come out of the back. Keep in mind it has to be large enough to fit the plug through initially. Again, I'll link to the size I used below. Previously I told people to use a big 10-inch fan that was powered by USB, but now I'm using a different fan. I'm going to link to a video I made showing the installation of a fan in the back of this Arcade1Up. It's a smaller fan, it's relatively quiet, it runs on USB power, and it's only about $14 for 2 of them. So check the description for that link. One final tip. I may have mentioned this somewhere earlier in the video, but I want to make this really clear and stress this point. I strongly recommend you leave your PC off your network. No Wi-Fi, no Ethernet. The reason for this is your computer is going to constantly be doing something in the background when it's connected to the network, like searching for updates. Launchbox is going to look for updates automatically. My philosophy here is if it's not broken, do not fix it. There's no need to update anything if everything's running smoothly. If you see down the line an update comes out for Launchbox that you really want, feel free to plug it in, get that update downloaded, but just know that that is likely when you're going to have something break software-wise. Also, when it's disconnected from the internet, you're highly unlikely to get any sort of malware, any sort of virus. It's just ideal to leave it disconnected from the network. All of my cabinets are not connected to the internet. In fact, when I do want to add new stuff to the cabinets, I download it on a separate computer, put it on a thumb drive, open the cabinet, put the thumb drive in, transfer the files off of there. Something I may not have mentioned at any other point in this video is you might want to pick up one of these. These are wireless keyboards. I have 3 of them, wireless keyboard and mouse pads that you can easily and quickly turn on to control your cabinet. For example, when I need to update the settings in Killer Instinct, I push F2 here, update my settings, and then go back to the game. It's much easier than having a keyboard and mouse lying around the cabinet somewhere, around your room. You don't have to open it. It's wireless, rechargeable. It's pretty cheap too. I'd highly recommend getting one of these. Check the description for the link. It will be somewhere around this timestamp. If you're reaching the end of this video, hopefully you've been smart about it and you've watched the whole thing first to make sure you think you can pull this off. But hopefully you're also at a point where you've actually done this, everything is working, and you now have a really cool arcade for your house. I really hope everything went smoothly. I hope you were able to follow my video easily. I know it was kind of a hodgepodge, almost like a huge compilation of all of my other videos. I did cut down parts of it to hopefully make it more expedient so you can actually watch this thing, get the information you need, work on your cabinet, and go back to the video to get to the next step. I would love to hear it if you guys had success with this. Please leave me a comment. Let me know what worked for you. If you had any issues where you found spots to be confusing, please let me know too. I don't know that I'll be able to go back and redo this whole video, but if I do a 3.0 version of this video, that'll be stuff that I can fix for that version down the line, and hopefully it'll just get better as we go. If you did enjoy this and you thought it was a good tutorial, please consider sharing it. I can't tell you how many people I still run into on the internet who don't know how to mod one of these with a PC. They all want to use a Raspberry Pi until they realize they can't run the games they really want with a Raspberry Pi. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already. I constantly pump out new videos about old arcades, Arcade1Up stuff, news, tutorials, anything I can do. If you have a request for a tutorial or for a topic, please leave it in the comments. I'll definitely consider making a video on it. Give this video a thumbs up if it helped you. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you on the next video.